So prior to the video, what I did is I'll put some stills in there of this. What I did is I used the solder center of the shrink wrap. These little wonderful devices over here. It's got shrink wrap and solder in the center, and I just soldered or heat shrunk all of this together already. So this is the plug that plugs into the battery and the power from the door. And then this one, I did the same thing, and I extended the wires from an old harness that I had and just extended the wires out to match the exact colors that I needed for the passenger side and for the driver side. So because the driver and or passenger has a black trace on the wires and a white trace on the blue. So yellow with black trace, white with black trace, and then a blue with white trace is one side, door side, and then solid colors, white, blue, and yellow is the other door side. Pretty simple. So I have that all together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow back in 2017 on the International Full-Size Jeep Association, a guy called Paul D. already did all this research. This is a the mirror switch out of a 94 Grand Cherokee. So 93 to 95, I guess they're all the same. But this is specifically out of a 94. So you have, he matched all the wires, and I'm going to hook all these wires up together using the plug that came from that switch and all the color-coded wires that he has already experimented with and figured out which ones needed to go where. So I'm going to put all that together right now and then take it over to the door and make sure it all works, and then I'm going to permanently heat shrink and solder it all together, and then we'll be finished. So kudos to Paul D, because he did all the work. I'm just doing the video of exactly what he did and taking some still pictures so that we have something to look at, because people like videos more than pictures. So here's what it is. So what he did say was it's reverse polarity from the Grand Wagoneer electrical input to the Grand Cherokee electrical input. So black is actually going to be the power. That's really the only thing that you have to remember, is black is power. And later on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my handy dandy pin removal kit, and I'm going to pull the red out and the black out, and I'm going to switch them around so it'll actually be red on red and black on black instead of red to black and black to red, which I like that better anyways. But people don't get confused someday in the future if they ever have to take this door apart and then they find all this different wiring. So let's put the rest of these together. I've got it listed out right here. The yellow with the green trace goes to white with black trace. I'm just using the wire nuts just to temporarily put them together so that we can test it before I go ahead and permanently put it in. And then next is the yellow with orange trace, goes to solid white. Then that's the top row. This is the top row. So the bottom row is blue with white, which is this end. And the blue with white goes to solid yellow. And what I did notice is that he also has both of the blue on my connections. On his connections, they are labeled blonde, so take that into consideration too. So his were labeled blonde, mine are actually blue. So the next one is the blue with the light blue, which is the other corner. that actually ties into both of the blue, solid blue and the blue with the white trace, which his was blonde and blonde with a trace. So that's the only difference in the coloration. Now in the door panel, going up to the left side mirror is actually blonde, a blonde wire, but they don't come down to the connector for whatever reason. It's just like on the passenger side, there's a yellow wire with an orange like this that goes to the passenger side, and it's supposed to be yellow with a black trace, and it's not. So Jeep again does whatever they feel like doing. And then the last wire we have to hook up is the white with a blue trace coming from the switch to a yellow with a black trace, which goes to the plug. And then this should just, once we get this together, take it over to the door, test it, make sure it works properly. It's pretty simple. I mean, it's time consuming to do exactly what I did because I wanted it to look just like a factory wiring harness. So it took a lot of time to do that. But putting it all together because of what Paul D did back, 4 years ago, saves us a lot of time. I mean, you'd rather have this that works and it's not going to break, vice this, which I had to tear apart and rebuild, and it does work, but it's going to fail again in the future just by design. It's just by design, it's going to fail again in the future. And if you're not a purist and you don't mind having something other than what's supposed to be in your Grand Wagoneer, then here's your next option. And you can get them in the same colors as the Grand Wagoneer, and then just cut a piece of plastic off of the mount that comes. This is the vent for the Grand Wagoneer, the Grand Cherokee, sorry. This is the vent for the Grand Cherokee, and this fits right into here. So I'm just going to cut this out, put that part in back of the door panel, and screw it in, and it'll be done. It'll be solid, and you won't have to worry about the old one failing in the future. So that's where we're at. I'm going to take this and go test it, and I'll come back and let you know how it went. Okay, so I remember we had some variations in Paul D's instructions because the original harness coming out has different connectors on it. Okay, so going to the driver's side mirror there's different color wires. Anyway, my coloration on mine is slightly different than his, like opposite of his. So on his yellow with green, went to a black or white with a black trace. Mine just goes to white. So mine are the opposite. Where it was white with a black trace, mine go to white. Where it was yellow with a black trace, mine goes to yellow. So mine are just a little bit opposite because of the ends. Because I didn't cut up this pristine, mirror controller harness. I went and found an old one and just clipped them off of the doors. So the one that's supposed to go to the driver is actually from the passenger. One goes to the driver. Anyway, they're different colors on here. So because now I have a full one that maybe somebody wants for an original, and they can get that from me, and I can just splice one together that works perfectly. Because the way I have it right now, I've got left and right control, up, down, left and right, and it works great. Exactly the situation it's in right now. So it's perfect. But again, these aren't the correct. If I would have cut those off and cut that off and then spliced them into this, it would have been exactly how Paul D said it was supposed to be. But since mine are different ends, then it's the opposite. As I said, where his blue with a white trace, right here went to yellow, mine goes to a white with black, you know. So, and I'll put all this in the description of how I set this up. Instead of just calling it out, I'll have pictures of each one and put them in the video as a still so that you can see each one. So that's it. Now I'm just going to take each one apart individually and solder them together, and we'll be set. So what I'll do is I'll take stills of each one, like this yellow and orange trace into the yellow with black trace, this yellow with green trace into white, blue with white trace into white with black trace, both the blue with trace and just the blue into the blue with light blue trace, white with blue trace into a solid yellow, and we know that black goes to red and red goes to black. So there you have it. So that you know how my setup is, not using the standard original harness plugs. I just made do with another one. So that was a lot of rambling, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So now I'm just going to take these wire nuts off and make sure that all these connections are solid, and then heat shrink and solder them together so you just see the standard Jeep colors. So as I said earlier, I was going to switch the black wire and the red wire, since it's the opposite in here. The black wire going into this is actually positive. So to do that, it's very simple. You just need a small little whatever, you know, you could use a paper clip, which that's what this is, paper clip, or I've got these little tools over here that remove connectors anyway. But this is a pretty simple process to swap this around. I'm surprised that he didn't do it in his instructions. You just push this up just like that, right? And then you push the other side up just like that. This center red part comes out and flies over there. The center red part comes out. So it's what holds everything firmly in place. Then you can take that same paper clip, and there's a little push holder, whatever you want to call it, that all you do is you push that over, and it literally, the connector just drops out. Sure. So there's just a little pin in there, little prong, whatever you want, I don't know what to call it. So you just push it back and it unlocks the connector, and then if you listen you can hear it lock back in when I push it back in. So I swapped the red was over here, the black was over here, so I swapped them around. Now they can be hooked up red to red, black to black, and you don't have any confusion. So it's pretty simple. And then all this does is just slide back in place, and it's got little clips on the side that hold it in place, and you can hear it lock in just like that, and you're done. Simple. So what I actually did was I took out all of the plugs out of the connector so that I can individually do them without having to heat up the connector, heat up into other wires that are next to each other. So I cut a section of that wire that goes into the plug off because I don't need that much, and cleaned up both ends of the wire. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how easy it is to use these shrink wrap solder connectors and a heat gun, and that will bind the two wires together permanently with the solder, and then bind the wires together with the shrink wrap. So I shrink wrap the ends just so that it's not going to move around. You also have to watch, don't heat it up too much because it's going to get soft and you could actually pull it apart. So I just leave the wire hang on its own weight while I'm doing the center section of the solder. Alright. Now we'll let that cool for just a second. And I'll take a picture so you can get a close-up, but you can see while you're heating it, you'll see the solder melt and then flow into the two wires. So all good, and I'm going to do that for the rest of them, and I'll come back and show you what the finished product looked like. Alright, so we've finished all of them, and I switched around the black and the red, so black is now black and red is now red, and they are all hooked up, soldered, shrink wrapped, everything's good to go. Put that together, and this is the new mirror controller wiring harness, which goes into this. So here's the old controller on the bottom, which is from a 1987 Grand Wagoneer, and the controller on top is from a 1994 Grand Cherokee. And as you can see, the wires are the same colors, the connectors are the same connectors. So it all worked out great. And now I can find someone that actually wants and needs this old original controller and get it back in a Jeep that'll appreciate it. And we can move on to the upgraded Grand Cherokee mirror controller. All good. Okay, so this is what the original looks like. And I wanted it to at least look like it belonged. So what I came up with was this. I cut down a door lock. Could also be a single window, power window bezel. So I cut that down to the shape I needed, and what I'll do is I will cut out the section out of this that I need, and I'll plug in the controller to this. There'll be enough around the edges to put in back of here, so that I can drill screw holes through this on the edges and into the plastic, and then it will fairly basically look like it actually belonged there. So we'll see what happens. Well, so there you have it, the final product. Got Jeep Grand Wagoneer trim. It's got Jeep Grand Cherokee mirror controller. Not perfect, but it's functional. So there you have it. Enjoy. Keep jeeping. We'll see you on the next project.